Shalom and welcome to this live stream from the organization Med Israel for Fred, or MIFF among friends. With Israel for Peace is a non-religious, non-partisan, pro-Israel organization established in 1978. Today we have more than 11,300 members in Norway itself and more than 600 members in Denmark and 70 members on Iceland. Usually we do these live streams in Norwegian, but since we have a guest from Israel today, we will make the whole live stream in English. And please use the opportunity to post questions and comments throughout the live stream. The last weeks have been filled with depressing news from Israel. Today, for a change, we will bring some good news about real cooperation on the grassroots level between Palestinians and Israelis. Our guest today is Avi Zimmerman, founder of Judea and Samaria Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
So I'm Conrad. Thank you for having me. It goes back to the year 2017. This isn't something we just started yesterday. Really was born out of an understanding that there are unrealized opportunities here in the region of Judea and Samaria, a region most often referred to by the international community as the West Bank. And we saw on the one hand, the differences between the Palestinian economy in Ramallah as opposed to the economic development in an Israeli community like Ariel, where I live. And we also saw the differences between Ariel and our Israeli counterparts in Tel Aviv. And so both populations have a lot to gain by developing the economy of the region. And the obvious approach to economics is free markets and open trade. And to do that, you have to begin first and foremost with your neighbors, Israelis and Palestinians doing business with one another. It's a great question, Conrad, and the point of reference is also very interesting. I'll just start with 2 quick points on that. The first, many have likened the work that we do to the Marshall Plan after World War II. But I prefer not to use that terminology because we're not looking for a boost package or a handout from a foreign government. We are looking to unlock the entrepreneurial, pioneering spirit of both populations in this area. We want there to be an internal combustion of economic activity. Sure, when governments want to partner with us, that's great, but we're not going to wait for other governments or even our own to step in and help us out. The business community needs to step up and perform. With regards to the term peace, that's also a very, very sensitive word or term here in this region, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. Different political parties and communities tend to use that word in a very different context. Yeah. And what means peace for one group might not mean peace for the other. And so we try to speak about economic development, which is a win-win for all communities. In terms of what we've accomplished, depends on what day you're asking. There's always something new. As a matter of fact, even during the violence of the last couple of weeks, we managed to open one of our programs that we had scheduled to begin last week, and we indeed launched last week, called the Field Integrated Innovation Accelerator. It's a business accelerator for joint partnerships between Israeli and Palestinian entrepreneurs, and not easy to open it during the given circumstances, but we have succeeded. We have over 250 Israeli-owned businesses in the Chamber of Commerce and over 250 Palestinian-owned businesses in the Chamber, and all of them are looking to one extent or another to work with the other population. We did also succeed, really something phenomenal, just last year with our first integrated business roundtable investment showcase. We've brought together a group of impact investors who are investing in the economic development of companies that they see fit for investment and venture growth. So that's a new piece of the puzzle and very exciting.
Yeah, great. Some of the followers commented that we had some sound problem, but that should be solved now. So sorry for that. They were hearing you all the time. That's good. They weren't hearing me all the time. So, and I guess to make peace, you need to listen to one another and hear one another, and these business events and the business dealings that you help facilitate. I'm sure this is a way to build peace in a much more endurable way than a signature on a piece of paper from a Palestinian leader that may not even have legitimacy among his own population.
You know, Conrad, we just briefed a group of Middle Eastern activists the other day. And when I say we, I'm referring to Ashraf Jabari of Hebron, who is one of the, he's really the leading Palestinian of this effort, certainly when it comes to sharing this story publicly. And he spoke about the frustration of the Palestinian street with the Palestinian leadership, amongst other things, which is what you're referring to, of course. It's a fair point. I think your first point about dialogue and conversation is part of the puzzle, but ultimately, as you drill down a little bit more, it's based on trust. So the two elements here that you have working to your advantage, when you do business with someone, you can only really do business with someone who you trust. Yeah. You will continue to do business with people who continue to earn that trust. That's how businesses are built. And then the other end is not where you begin. You're not your point of departure, but where you continue to develop further. And that's on the outcome basis. And the advantage of this approach over, like you say, signed pieces of paper is that it's very easy to measure the outcome. The business deal worked or it didn't. The markets are responding or they're not. The business world doesn't have the same flexibility or lack of accountability that politicians enjoy. You either perform or you have to rebuild yourself, or maybe you have to close your business. And with that competitive marketplace, you have the opportunity to really prove the value of what you're bringing.
After a short break, we will ask Avi how these last weeks of Palestinian incitement and violence has affected their work. But first, you can all be inspired by this nice video clip where we encourage you to buy Israeli goods.
Til tross for alle rop om boykott, fortsetter importen av israelske varer å øke år etter år. Og det er ikke rart, for kvaliteten på israelske varer er som regel utmerket. Som regel er det veldig tydelig hvilket opprinnelsesland frukt og grønt kommer fra. Men av og til så kan det lønne seg å gå litt nærmere og kikke, og da ser man, så stender det opprinnelsesland Israel. Og her igjen et nytt eksempel, opprinnelsesland Israel. I tillegg til mye deilige israelske frukter finner du også israelske poteter i butikkene, og ifølge Bama skal de israelske potetene være av den aller ypperste kvalitet. Nå har jeg akkurat vært og handlet en svær bærepose full av israelske varer. Jeg oppfordrer deg også til å se etter israelske varer i butikken når du er ute og handler.
Thanks a lot for following this live stream from Israel for Fred. And our guest today is Avi Zimmerman. And thanks for sticking with us, Avi. And like I said in the introduction, the last few weeks have been filled with depressive news from Israel, not only the missile attacks, but also a great level of violence inside Israeli cities. And how has this all affected your cooperation with Palestinian businesses, and what do the Palestinian business leaders say?
Great question, Conrad. And of course, there's always a range of different responses and how people feel about the situation. But for the most part, let's just start with the day-to-day. In the marketplace, the violence had begun before the end of Ramadan. The month of Ramadan ends with Eid al-Fitr, which is a 3-day celebration following Ramadan. And guess what? Palestinians and Arab Israelis as well went to the stores and purchased food for the feasts. And similarly, just 1.5 days later, we had the Jewish holiday of Shavuot. And similarly, Israelis, Jews went to the stores, purchased their goods and their celebratory meals because the marketplaces continue to work, because businesses continue to operate, because that's the reality that we live in. And that reality is actually far more real than the politics, the diplomacy, and even the violence. That said, we spoke before about the need for trust when running a business and when running an integrated business. Mm-hmm. And that trust has been stress tested over these last few weeks.
Yeah.
There are those who are more encouraged than ever before to work together, and others who are taking a step back. My experience in speaking with a number of our associates these last couple of days and weeks is that the people who are already invested in interpopulation relationships, specifically through business, they have thrown themselves into this even more. They're more committed than before. They realize it's the only way to provide opportunity, and they have, again, further invested in what they're already doing. On the other hand, the people who don't yet have those relationships, or who are debating as to whether to go into business with someone from a different population, they're going to take a few steps back. They're a little more concerned than they were before, which says a lot about the realities that we're grappling with, but also says a lot for the value proposition. If you're invested, you want to make sure that your investment continues to be fruitful, and you will continue to develop those partnerships.
Yeah. How does the Palestinian Authority react to your work?
Well, we don't really develop a direct relationship with the Palestinian Authority because they have a policy of what they call anti-normalization.
Yeah.
They strive to prevent normalized relations and normalized economic relations between Israel and Palestinians. Indeed, their focus is to denormalize or anti-normalize, specifically in Judea and Samaria, this region. And so it's really essentially impossible to work with them as a government. Of course, people transfer goods, they'll pay taxes, but it's a reality that develops through the marketplace, not the sort of relationship that we try to have. Indeed, because of their anti-normalization policy and because of the tactics of the Palestinian Authority, it is intimidating often for Palestinians to do business with Israelis. There are fines and sometimes jail time for a Palestinian who does business with Israelis. And so they have to find a way to keep things under wraps. You might ask, well, if it's so difficult to do business with Israelis, why bother? The answer is really pretty simple. Every business wants to have markets, they want to have clients, they want to have suppliers, especially when the biggest and most successful economy in the entire region is in your backyard, you don't want to overlook that marketplace. So it pays to work with Israelis, but they have to be very careful.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know how many Palestinians work in Israeli settlements?
There are about 120,000 Palestinians working in Israeli communities in internationally recognized Israel, and another 40,000 Palestinians working in Israeli communities in Judea and Samaria. Those 40,000, every day that they go to work, they're actually breaking a Palestinian Authority law, which prevents them from working with Israeli employers in this region. The same anti-normalization policy that I mentioned before is actually law. And again, notwithstanding that policy, every single day, 40,000 Palestinians show up for work, break the Palestinian Authority law because they don't have alternatives. The Palestinian Authority job opportunities do not pay the same salaries. It's a fraction of the salary here. They do not provide the same social benefits. And the Palestinians speak of better working conditions in general, better work environment with working with Israelis. And so they are voting with their feet. The wait lists for job opportunities are extremely long. So again, these are the realities, economic realities that surpass a lot of the political talk that we hear.
Yeah. So when Norwegian leaders talk about proposing boycotting Israeli settlements, they will also hurt like hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that will also lose their income.
Oh, it's much more than the hundreds of thousands. First of all, you're right. Ignorance is very, very dangerous. It's very hard for Palestinians to hear that people in any country, it can be Norway, it can be anywhere else, or college students at their computers are trying to wage boycotts against this region. And they say that they have the best interests of the Palestinians in mind, but they didn't bother asking the Palestinians what they thought. Because the Palestinians working at these factories or working at these businesses, sometimes in senior leadership positions in these businesses, they don't want to be boycotted. They don't want to be shut down. The only times that the boycott was quote unquote successful never harmed an Israeli company. Not one Israeli company has faltered because of the boycott. There are companies who left this region and relocated on the other side of the Green Line in internationally recognized Israel. But what that meant was that the Palestinians lose their jobs, and those jobs are taken by Israelis instead. And so you can cheer all you want for the boycott movement, but you have to understand, if you are boycotting an Israeli company, the greatest success that you can possibly see is that you put a Palestinian individual and his entire family, oftentimes a multi-generation family that counts on his high income that he was earning with Israelis, you put him out on the street. And instead you provide an income for another Israeli family. So if that's your policy, then continue with the boycotts. I think it's tragic and unfortunate.
Yeah. So apart from that argument, what would you say to Norwegians and Europeans or others advocating for boycott of Israeli settlements?
It's really simple. Stop the hate. You have to stop the hate. It doesn't take you anywhere. It doesn't build anything. If your greatest accomplishment is that you try to ruin something for somebody else, that's, again, it's a sad comment in my personal opinion, and you could argue with me, but it's a sad comment of how you view the world and how you view making the world a better place. The fact is, the reality is that partnerships are the only way forward. Now, if you really truly believe that Jews, Israelis, should not be breathing the air in Israel, or let's say on the Temple Mount in Al-Aqsa, which is what the recent campaign against Israel was all focused on. You really believe that Jews should have no such access. You are so disdainfully, what should I call it, exclusive or racist in your policies, well, then we really don't have much to discuss, because racism, it's just, there's not a lot to converse about. You're driven by hate, and that's the way that it is. But if you're not driven by hate, you truly want to see things better, if not for the Israelis, then at least for the Palestinians, you need to speak a language of partnership, of win-win. You know, this idea that if we could just isolate the Palestinians and life will be better for them, I think you should ask the Iranians if they like the sanctions that the United States brought against them, if they like being isolated. Does North Korea like being isolated? Normal people in normal markets, especially the European Union, should know this, are looking for those connections, those relations, those partnerships. And so there's great potential in partnership, but you have to stop preventing those partnerships. You have to normalize, not anti-normalize.
Yeah. And speaking about holy places, in April you participated in a very special meal in Hebron, close to the grave of the patriarchs. Tell me about that meal and what made it special.
Every year, my associate Ashraf Jabari hosts us, a number of business people, Israeli and Palestinian, largest Palestinian city. It is the leading Palestinian economy, and his particular home is situated, as you mentioned, Conrad, just a few feet away from the tomb of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. And so we all share the same great-great-great-great-grandfather. You can call him Abraham, you can call him Ibrahim. It's the same person. And we understand that he wants to see his descendants, again, working in partnership with one another. And that's the theme of the iftar. The iftar is a fast-breaking meal during the month of Ramadan. It happens every evening, but we have this annual gathering, and we bring more and more business people to be exposed to Muslim culture, to the Arabic culture of the region, to the foods, to the smells, to the fellowship and the gathering, and it's a win-win. In fact, one of the outcomes of that, one of the leaders of the communities, the Israeli communities in Judea and Samaria, attended, and he got up. He said, "I'm 50 years old, and this is the first time that I'm ever attending an iftar meal." And during that presentation, he said, I'm coming to understand that one of our barriers is a language barrier.
Yeah.
Let's start Arabic classes for Israelis. And lo and behold, just yesterday, we finally started advertising for a course. We thought it was going to take us about a week and a half to get full enrollment for 2 courses. We actually fully enrolled in a couple of hours, about 5-fold the number of attendees that we had planned for. There is a thirst for these relationships. There is a thirst for these opportunities, and we're in the business of making those opportunities available.
That's amazing. So where will these language courses be? In Jerusalem or spread out?
Actually, I'm sitting right now here in the offices of the Judea and Samaria Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Ariel, and just across the hallway from here at the Field Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation Center. We have a couple of rooms here. We've got the boardroom, and there's some other spaces here. And because the course is going to be so much bigger than expected, we're going to have to take a few different rooms at the same time. And this will be the first of a number of courses. In fact, there are some businesses that want to bring the course into the business so that people who are already working side by side can communicate better with one another.
Yeah.
And so it's just very exciting. It's not the biggest thing we're doing, but it is an indicator that even after the violence, there's a strong interest in finding ways to move forward.
Yeah. So your partner in the commerce chamber, he is obviously a Muslim, and what's the main differences between his interpretation of Islam and, say, for example, Hamas interpretation?
I don't want to speak for Ashraf.
No.
I certainly don't want to speak to an analysis of the Quran. I think that's above my pay grade. But I will say, Conrad, that Ashraf and his entire family, when I say family, we're talking about 16,000 family members, right? Families it's a broad term in this region. And that family has for more than 50 years, ever since the Jews returned to Hebron in 1967, they have been working in partnership with Israelis. That's why Ashraf was so interested when we started the Chamber of Commerce to work in partnership. They don't only see this as not contradictory to their faith, they see this as part of their faith. And again, every time we come to Hebron, Ashraf always speaks about being right next to Ibrahim and making Ibrahim smile proudly at his descendants getting along.
Yeah. I guess one of the reasons why I ask is that in the secular way of looking at the world that is common in Scandinavia, it's so easy to say all the Jews are like this, all the Muslims and all the Palestinians are like that, and you don't bring out the great variety within the Palestinian society, for example. Like you are saying now that there is a family of 16,000 in the city of Hebron itself, in support of cooperation with Israel. This is not covered in the Norwegian media, and the media, if they ever quote Israelis, it's usually either extreme left-wing Israelis criticizing the Israeli government, or like maybe extreme settlers who are into violent fantasies, etc. So you don't bring out like the mainstream Israeli view. So I would like our viewers to recognize that there are many ways of being Muslim, many ways of being Jewish and Christian or whatever, and if we can learn that, it's a good step forward.
Yes, Conrad, I'm an Orthodox or observant Jew. I was born and raised that way. Ashraf is an observant Muslim. He fasts during Ramadan. He has gone multiple times on Hajj, on pilgrimage to Mecca. He, when he serves food at his home, at the iftar meal, he gives two food options. There's halal and kosher, and you can choose. The halal looked like it was tastier, so some of the Jews chose to eat the halal instead of eating the kosher, and we're open to that. Everyone can choose what they feel most comfortable with. But there is, you make an important point here, Conrad, because in addition to the variety, I would say there's two important points here. One of them is the norm is usually not what they cover in the news. The people who are going about their business day in and day out, and they're making a living for their family, you don't hear about them. You hear about the fringe. You hear about the extreme.
Exactly.
And fortunately, those are far and few between. They're very rare. They exist. And fortunately, Israel has a very strong security apparatus to keep that to a minimum when it comes to extremist terrorist activity. But it's there, but it's not the average person. That's for certain. And the other point, when we have these opportunities to engage with one another, these different communities, they the language of normal is actually, like you say, it's diversified, but it's also common. It's a shared language. And so even though we come from different faith perspectives, it's all based on respect, mutual respect. So if I said before that businesses are predicated upon mutual trust, so relationships are predicated upon mutual respect.
Absolutely. Avi, thanks a lot for joining us. It was really interesting to hear about your work, and all the best in your efforts.
Thank you, Conrad, to you and to your community as well.
And yeah, keep safe, and we'll talk more next time.
Thank you very much, Conrad.
Hei, jeg heter Gabriel Edland, og jeg har vært engasjert i forsvaret av Israel i mellom 20 og 30 år. For å si det kort, så mitt engasjement til støtte for jødene basert på at jødene bør behandles slik som alle andre folk. Og når vi ser på hvordan jødene har blitt behandlet i de siste 2000 år, og med holocaust, siste verdenskrig, så skjønner vi at dette med jødehat, antisemittisme, det kan få enormt alvorlige konsekvenser. Så jeg ønsker å gjøre det jeg kan for å demme opp mot antisemittismen, demme opp mot hat mot Israel. Så MIFF, som religiøst nøytral, og også partipolitisk nøytral, den organisasjonen som har engasjert meg. Og det har gitt meg veldig mye. Jeg føler en utrolig glede og takknemlighet for å få lov å gjøre det som jeg gjør. Jeg har påtatt meg ansvar for å ekspedere, altså pakke og sende ut alle bokbestillinger på de bøkene MIFF har gitt ut. Og nå har jeg boklageret mitt hjemme. Bøkene ligger rundt kontorpulten min. Så når det kommer en bestilling, så det å skrive etikett og pakke og levere på posten. Og det jeg veldig stolt og kry av å kunne gjøre. Så håper jeg, og det de tingene kanskje som jeg tenker mye på nå, vi trenger å nå ut til folk med informasjon. Hvis du vil ha faktainformasjon, hvis du vil prøve å forstå litt mer av den konflikten som foregår i Midtøsten. Forstå litt mer enn det skeive, ensidige, ofte negative bildet som NRK og NTB gir, så vil jeg sterkt anbefale bøkene våre. De skrevet av profesjonelle. Det forskjellige typer bøker, men veldig informative og nyttige på hver sin måte. Kjøp bøker, lån de ut til venner. Hvis du ikke synes du har råd til å kjøpe, eller av andre grunner ikke føler du kan kjøpe, så gå på bibliotekene, spør etter bøkene våre, lån de der, og veldig ofte så vil kanskje biblioteket da kjøpe inn bøkene. Så det mange måter å være engasjert på. Men å kjempe for det som du vet sant og riktig og rettferdig, det en ting som alle mennesker burde være engasjert av.
Vi håper du vil abonnere på Med Israel for fred på YouTube. Her finner du et stort antall foredrag av internasjonale eksperter, aktuelle direktesendinger og korte videoklipp. Husk å like, abonnere og motta varsler. MIFFs YouTube-kanal vil gi deg noe alle trenger, mer forståelse for Israel.